This is Colin Liddell, and this is the Shortpod, a brief and succinct podcast commenting on the events and issues of the day. And today is the 6th of September 2022. Now, today is an important and significant day in British history, or not as the case may be, because today is the day that Britain yet again changed its Prime Minister. Out goes Boris Johnson, the lovable buffoon who has a kind of rapport with the British public, who pulled off an impressive election victory in 2019 and finally got Brexit done, but was laid low by his propensity to party during the COVID lockdown. And in comes Liz Truss and a lot of ethnically enriched ministers at a particularly difficult time in Britain's political history, what with the war in the Ukraine, the energy crisis and a host of other problems. So, what is likely to happen? How is Britain going to shape up in the years ahead? Are we going to be drawn into making predictions? Now, there's a few things to be said. The Conservative Party has been in power now for 12 years, which is quite a long time. They got into power back in 2010 in coalition with the Lib Dems because people were really a bit fed up with the Labour Party, which itself had been in power at that point for 13 years. The Conservative coalition government in 2010 was not particularly strong. David Cameron, who was the Prime Minister at the time, he was pushing this agenda of modernising, quotation marks, the Conservative Party to make it more woke, to make it more appealing to people on the left and the centre. And because of the weakness of the party, he had to try to keep power by granting various kinds of referendums to bolster his power, most notably the Brexit referendum, which ironically ended his power in 2016. That came 1 year after an election in which David Cameron managed to beat the Labour Party again because people didn't want to vote for a Labour Party that was led by Ed Miliband, look him up to see why, and which would have to rely on the support of the Scottish National Party. But once again, the Conservative Party was not particularly strong. Following David Cameron, we had Theresa May, who was generally seen as a weak leader, but that was also because her party was very divided, and a lot of that divisiveness, of course, came from the hot issue of Brexit and how to Brexit and whether we should Brexit and so on. In 2019, Theresa May was overthrown by a coup in the Conservative Party, prompted by fear of Conservative voters abandoning the party and supporting Nigel Farage's Reform Party. And Boris Johnson then took over, and later in the year 2019 there was a general election, and Boris Johnson managed to do astoundingly well because he won, I think it was 357 seats in the 650 seat Parliament. At that time in 2019, it looked like the Conservative Party was finally getting a grip on power. We had a generally popular Prime Minister. We had a Conservative Party with a strong majority that would be able to push through a lot of its policies, and the Labour Party seemed to be a thing of the past. Fast forward to 2022, and the picture is a little bit more complicated. Now, the main reason the Conservative Party under Boris Johnson did very, very well was because they were able to win what is known as the Red Wall seats. These are a group of constituencies, generally in the north of England, which were traditionally held by Labour, but which also strongly supported Brexit. And the Conservative Party, by being the party of Brexit, was able to appeal to the voters in those constituencies and pull them over for the first time ever to the Conservative Party. So even under Boris Johnson's Conservative government, with its relatively large majority, the power of the Conservative Party was in fact still quite fragile, because the only way for the Conservative Party to retain its stronghold of power would be for the Conservative Party to retain its hold on the red wall seats. And the Conservative Party's hold on those seats was actually dependent on quite a transitory political phenomenon, namely Brexit. So now we're moving into the government of Liz Truss, somebody who has a lot less charisma, a lot less popularity than Boris Johnson, and someone who, much more alarmingly, has much less to offer the so-called red wall seats. Brexit has already been done. It's very, very unlikely the Labour Party would run on reversing Brexit. Brexit is now off the table and it's no longer a bargaining chip. So the problem that the Truss government has is it has to find a new red wall issue, i.e. something that would strongly and viscerally appeal to white working class voters in the north of England. Can you think of anything that might possibly appeal to them? Now, one of the reasons that these voters voted for Brexit is because a lot of them were actually quite nationalist in their own way, quite anti-immigration, quite pro-British. So one possibility would be for the Truss government to come in and be very, very hard on immigration, i.e. deporting the illegal refugees who are turning up on the southern coast in rubber dinghies from France, and also greatly limiting general immigration into the country. However, there's absolutely zero chance of the Conservatives doing that. At most, they might go hard on illegal immigration, but even that's going to be quite difficult for them. So I don't think being hard on immigration is in the running as a substitute for Brexit to offer to the red wall seats. Rather the opposite, in fact, because what we see with Liz Truss is this incredibly woke and diverse cabinet dominated by ethnics and females. So even if the Truss government turns out to be lucky, i.e. 2 weeks after she gets in, somebody bumps off Vladimir Putin and the price of gas and oil falls through the floor, even if Liz Truss does everything right, I don't think there's anything there to offer the red wall seats. So at the next election, which must come within the next 2 years, probably almost all of the red wall seats are going to revert back to Labour. Now also I think the other thing that bolstered the Conservative Party was fear of the SNP. I think the Scottish National Party, their political power is probably at its high water mark. The Scottish Parliament has been designed to fail, as I've talked about before, and the Scottish Government has been doing quite poorly, and they've been doing so badly, in fact, that they can't run on their economic, educational or law and order record, because if they do that they'll be annihilated at the polls. So they're trying to turn the next election into a referendum on independence again, because that's their strongest issue. But even on that, their strongest issue, support for a referendum on independence, is trailing quite low at the moment. People in Scotland have very, very little interest in another independence referendum, and that's their ace in the pack. And without that, they're going to become less and less popular. And as the SNP fades in Scotland, probably you're going to see a Labour revival. And so with the weakening of the SNP in Scotland, which I think is very likely to happen, that's going to make it easier for English people to support a Labour government, even one with a leader like Keir Starmer, who often gets criticised, quite rightly. But anyway, Keir Starmer doesn't have to be that brilliant. The Labour Party just have to keep a lid on some of their kind of loony fringe, and at the next election what will happen is the Labour Party will revive a bit in Scotland, the red wall seats will come back to the Labour Party, and you'll probably get a hung parliament. And if the Lib Dems are able to take seats from the Tories in a number of places, then I can quite easily see a Liberal Labour coalition government taking shape at the 2024 election. It might even be possible that Labour will be forced to do a deal with even a diminished SNP, And if that happens, you could possibly see another couple of referendums, one on proportional representation to placate the Lib Dems, and one on Scottish independence to placate the Scottish National Party. And then you probably have 2 or 3 years of a Labour Lib Dem government kind of limping along with all the kind of negative economic fallout of the last few years of overspending, hitting them very, very hard. And that, incidentally, would set the scene for Boris Johnson to make his triumphant return to British politics. So that's kind of how I see British politics shaping up over the next few years. Liz Truss gets in for a couple of years. At the next election, the Tories lose. Liz steps down. Some sort of Labour coalition is formed, and that doesn't do very well either. It falls apart after 2 or 3 years, and maybe the Tories get back in with Boris 2.0. So that's all from me. Over and out.